My name's Bonnie Stewart, and I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Society of Certified Public Accountants. I'm here today to join in with the speaker before me, the electrical unions, to indicate our opposition to Senate Bill 9. Connecticut CPAs pay a fee of $565 a year for renewal. It's 6 times higher than the national average and significantly higher than anyone else in the Northeast. We, similar to what the electrical union was saying, we have mandatory CPE. In our case, it's 40 hours a year. We have experience requirements before we can become CPAs. There's just a lot we do to maintain our licenses. However, we don't have to have a license for most of the things that we do. And therefore, as the price has risen for registration, the number of CPAs that continue to be licensed in our state is dropping. We're kind of pricing ourselves out of the market because we have what's called CPA mobility, and you can be a licensed accountant in any state and perform work in our state. So I would strongly urge you to reject this measure. The CPAs feel very strongly that this would actually harm our profession in the state and not move us forward. And just to help you get at a glance, a quick understanding of what we face. At the end of my testimony, it's the second to last page, I've included a chart that shows Connecticut in red compared to the rest of the nation, and you will see that we are head and shoulders above every other state and what we charge for a renewal fee. And in my testimony, there's also a grid early on where you can see just how much higher we are than anyone else in the Northeast. So for example, our 1-year renewal fee compared to every other states would get us a minimum of 4.5 years worth of licensing in the state that's the next most expensive, and as much as 11 years in the state that is the least expensive in the Northeast. So I would strongly encourage you to reject Senate Bill 9.
Senator Wickos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Bonnie, for your testimony. I think we're going to be, at least I'm going to speak to my counterpart, looking at possibly addressing the registration fee issue, which Mr. McIntyre spoke about as when somebody has to, when they want to get into the apprenticeship program, they have to pay a fee. And I think that's where Senator Duff and I were looking at trying to remove that barrier, because some folks that are just trying to get some employment, they don't have the money necessarily to do that. Is there any fee that somebody that wants to move towards the goal of becoming a CPA, similar to an apprenticeship program, that they have to register as, and could you talk a little bit about that if there is one?
So our initial fee is $150 to register versus our renewal fee is $565 a year. It's a significant fee, but not nearly the problems that we face with renewal. To be quite honest, it's the cost of sitting for the exam that's so expensive for most of our members. I would tell you the biggest challenge getting more CPAs is the fact that we require more than a bachelor's degree now. Most people don't realize that for accountants, but they have to have a minimum of 150 hours in order to become a CPA. You can start to sit for the exams before you've got the full 150. But I would tell you right now that's probably the biggest barrier we face just with the cost of college educations now. Many people want to start work right after they graduate from college. What we're seeing is that more people are becoming accountants at companies than are going into public practice, because to be an accountant at a company, you don't have to have your CPA credential. And therefore, you can go into that line of work without having the additional 30 hours, which is very expensive and something that I believe deters many people from going into the CPA line of work.
Who pays, who sets the rate for the examination?
That's set by the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, so it's not a Connecticut-based rate.
And if this legislation was limited to the building trades, specifically just for the registration fee, then you would have no opinion on the bill?
We'd love to
Well,
see
you'd
it
still be
expanded
opposed.
to reduce our renewal rates. But no, we wouldn't be in opposition to the measure as is. Our big concern right now is not increasing our
Sure.
renewal rates any further.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for the point, Senator. Other questions? Representative Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Ms. Stewart.
Hi.
A couple quick questions. How much does it cost to take the CPA exam?
I apologize. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I will get that to you today.
Okay. And how about CPA review courses? Do you have that number?
The CPA review courses vary because there's a number of people that offer them, but they're over $1,000 generally.
And I know everyone wants to pass the CPA exam the first time, but on an average, how many times does it take someone to pass the exam?
It ranges significantly from school to school and from state to state, but I will tell you that the number of people that pass it the first time, it's recently undergone significant changes, and it's a more expansive exam, I'm going to say now, than it was before. You actually have to show how you would apply the different concepts that you've learned. So if I gave you the rate, it would be the rate from the old exams. We don't have, I don't believe we even have 2 years full data yet. But I believe that for the average, I'm trying to look at all the schools together in the state, I'm going to say 50%. But let me circle back to you with a hard number on that too, because I know each of the schools versus the overall rate.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Other questions? Representative Altobello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning.
Hi.
Under your CPA mobility, it appears you have reciprocity in 49 states.
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you who the 50th is.
We're not one of them, which is so unusual because we're oftentimes the last one to get on board, and
I said I wasn't going to ask.
that's good.
If I'm a current CPA in Connecticut, I work for a Connecticut firm, why wouldn't I just go to Springfield and renew my license there for $81 instead of $565?
So we are finding that many Connecticut CPAs are now licensed outside of the state in addition to Connecticut, and don't use their, just because you do not have to be a CPA to perform a lot of the work that CPAs perform, so they only have to be a CPA for attestation purposes, or if they're saying I'm a CPA. But if you'll see, most accounting firms are now known as advisory firms because what they're doing has expanded so dramatically. So your question's a very good one. What we see is that people are opening offices in Springfield, in Providence, in New York. Most of the organizations that I would say mid-size don't only have multiple offices in Connecticut, but they're now making sure they get one over the border. It is something where I do believe we've priced ourselves a bit out of the market, and that's too bad. So the people that we're seeing grow at those advisory firms here in the state, the accounting firms that now refer to themselves as advisory, it's not necessarily the number of CPAs at those firms that are growing. We're seeing more of the IT people, the engineering people that don't have the same licensing issues.
So if I wanted to perform attestation work in Connecticut, do I need this $565 fee?
The only person who would have to have that fee was the person that signed the papers. So you will find that most of our younger CPAs are no longer licensed in Connecticut. They may be registered here, but they're no longer licensed because they're not the ones who signed the papers, and because it is such an expensive fee, it's a way for the firms to save money by just not having their people licensed. Instead, it is one of the firm partners that will be licensed and sign the papers. So they can do attestation work, they can't sign those papers. It'll be their supervisor or one of the managing, one of the partners in the group that tend to be those that have an active license and sign those papers.
And lastly, do you have any idea how much we collect in this $565 fee annually?
You know, I don't know any longer, but I will tell you, despite all the money you collect, none of it goes to the State Board of Accountancy, who oversees us.
Thanks for the donation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Acker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you. Quick question. Do you know if the how many licensed CPAs that we do have, and is that growing or lessening?
So I can tell you how many registered CPAs we have, which is different than licensed. It'll be a combination of those who pay a flat fee because they've passed the exam, but they are not using their CPA credential in terms of attestation work, signing the papers or holding themselves out to be a CPA. They can do the tax work, et cetera, without saying it, and it's significantly less expensive. According to the Department of Consumer Protection's files, we have 12,000 CPAs in Connecticut right now.
And they're just the ones that you say are registered, so the one,
That includes registered, licensed, and so a lot of times when people retire, they'll go from having a license if they were a partner to being registered. They still want to be able to get back in the game if for whatever reason they want to serve on a board as a treasurer or anything like that. So we have 12,000 that are a combination of registered and licensed.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.